Story 1. Putting me down in front of our friends, and for that matter, the friends laughing and never standing up for me. I'm glad I've moved on from both situations. Story 2. I wasn't his type at all. He mentioned a few times that his type was blonde girls with a more natural and toned-down style. I'm an alternative style girl with a lot of tattoos and piercings. I wasn't just not his usual type or his dream girl. I was barely what he wanted at all. Story 3. His constant lying about the tiniest things, such as what he ate for lunch that day. Like, why in God's name would you need to lie about something so minuscule? Story 4. Only bringing up criticisms of me as a way to deflect criticisms I had of him. I could do no wrong until I asked him to respect a boundary of mine, also known as check his ego. Then he'd list every mistake I've made as justification for not needing to do what I asked. I finally got tired of feeling simultaneously ignored and punished for speaking up. I never claimed to be perfect, and I'm willing to talk about my flaws too. I just ask that it be a separate conversation and not used as a rationale for my needs to be diminished. Story 5. I dated a man who seemed so open, considerate, fun and funny, down to earth. But when I learned how poorly his 3 kids were faring in life, and how he blamed all of them for their failings and how indignant he was about them not staying in regular contact with him, red flags were definitely raised. When his oldest child told us that I was too good for him, I should have cut and run. And then he left me for the woman in a state across the country he had been simultaneously dating while seeing me. My foolish self had no idea. My foolish heart was broken. Story 6. He always had a reason for us to never hang out at his place. At first, it was nice that I never had to leave my home area, but eventually, it started getting weird. When I called him out on hiding a secret family, it turned out that he was a hoarder. Story 7. Knowing it was a giant red flag but having the world's biggest crush, I ignored the cheats on everyone she dates, including with me on another one of my friend's flags. In my defense, I had been told they had broken up. Predictably, she cheated on me. It still sucked, but I definitely wasn't surprised about it. Story 8. The amount of alcohol she drank was too much. I initially tried to ignore the racism, but eventually I called it out, which caused fights. Story 9. He had this attitude of not making an effort to take me on dates or show that I am special to him. He never appreciated the little things I did, like cooking for him or making myself presentable. Story 10. The amount of alcohol he consumed was concerning. At first, I dismissed it because he never missed a day of work, was quite athletic, and enjoyed working out. It dictated where we socialized. For example, we couldn't go to a cinema that didn't serve alcohol. He felt judged if I didn't feel like drinking or getting high, even though it didn't cross my mind. In the end, our relationship ended in a spectacular fashion, and I have no idea if his abusive nature was a result of his addiction. Either way, I will never touch another addict with a 10-foot pole. Story 11. Zero accountability. She would find reasons and excuses for every little thing. I was convinced as time went on I'd hit bedrock, and she would apologize for things at some point, but I underestimated her ability to keep digging. I should have ended it 2 months in, but she was gorgeous. Lessons learned. Story 12. We would go out with friends. She touched me all the time. It's like she was marking her territory. I mean, I like when my girlfriend touches me, but she latched on. Story 13. Doesn't appear to register a word I say and sometimes just interrupts me mid-sentence with a remark of his own. It's almost like I'm white noise sometimes. Story 14. Ugh, pulls out talking animal story. Story 15. Someone who thinks they need to be high to enjoy anything. Waking up, grocery store, road trips, movies, zoo, literally everything. If they aren't high all the time, they are mean. Story 16. I was sick with an upper respiratory infection, and instead of trying to take care of me or get me medication, he said that the world doesn't stop just because you're sick and that maybe I should go home to my mom if I needed someone to take care of me. This was a recurring issue. A few years later, I threw out my back, and rather than trying to get me some ibuprofen or a heating pad, he said good luck and went to bed. Story 17. Having little to no friends and having fallen out with all past friends, they were the victim in every situation. Edit. I too have experienced fallouts in friendships, but to clarify, My ex was a compulsive liar and told half-truths. There is something to be said about mindset in general, but my ex was a manipulative person who got called out in many of their relationships, and it ended dramatically. That's not the story I heard, though. Story 18. All of these were in the same relationship. He really didn't like women all that much, but he wasn't self-aware enough to realize it. A couple of examples of that: we were listening to a female-led band once, and he said, "The instrumentals are good, but wasted with her. I just really never care about things that women do." Whenever I went out with my friends, he would ask if we talked about makeup and periods. He was horrible to his mother and grandmother, as was his brother. They did it jokingly, and in their defense, their grandmother gave it back tenfold, but it was pretty obvious it hurt his mom a lot of the time, and they didn't seem to care. I'm a very low-maintenance person overall, and I didn't have high expectations around an engagement or a wedding. The only requirement I had for my engagement was that I didn't want it to happen on a holiday. The only thing I felt strongly about for a wedding was that I didn't want any kids there. He proposed on Christmas Eve, refused to back me up with his family about not having kids, and told his family they would be invited, even cousins who we barely knew. He had no opinions on any other aspect of the wedding, wouldn't even go to the food tasting with me, and when he realized I put a couple of songs I thought he liked on the list of songs to play during dinner, he snarkily said something like, "I told you I didn't want any songs. There are a million more, I'm sure." It was a long 10 years of me not standing up for myself. Story 19. Constantly sniffling and blowing his nose, the bartender with a regular cocaine habit, who said it was allergies. 34 years old and had a roommate who literally lived in a closet. Love bombing. Story 20. He only liked it when I wore the outfits he picked out. I thought he just didn't want my cleavage drawing too much attention. I realize now he was grooming me for total control. Story 21. She told me that she has never seen pornography in her life and has never engaged in self-pleasure. She went on to tell me that if a show or movie has any nudity or a non-nude sex scene, she'll turn it off. 2 years later, the furthest we had gone was kissing on the cheek. She was outright traumatized by the thought of doing anything sexual because of something from her childhood. I tried to be supportive, but after 2 years of zero physical affection, I realized that I would end up cheating on her, so I broke up for both of us. Story 22. He was cheap. He always forgot his wallet when we went out. At restaurants, he went to the restroom right before our check arrived. He didn't know the party was a potluck. I could go on, but my blood pressure is rapidly rising. Story 23. Bro. His mother. He's the biggest mama's boy that ever lived. Disgusting. He's also broke. And he lied about being a good dad. Story 24. Oh boy, where do I begin? He had a job for the first 2 months, but the next 2 years, all he did was smoke from the second he got up until whenever he fell asleep. He was suspicious of any friends, male or female, as if I had ulterior motives if I wanted to hang out with anyone besides him. The first incident, I'm terrible with directions, was when we first started dating. I knew he lived west and thought 2 roads going west connected. They didn't, and I had to turn around. It was like a 15 to 20-minute detour to get back on the right highway. But eventually, I got there. The first thing he asked was why I went the wrong direction and what I was doing for those 20-ish minutes because he saw where I was on Snapchat. It turned into an awkward suspicion of me secretly meeting up with someone when I'm just directionally challenged. I was living in Denver, and all I knew was that the mountains were west. I thought all the roads connected, but 285 does not connect to 70. Also, a coworker was going to donate a 20-ish-year-old car his mother-in-law had stopped using. It had low miles. He just had no room or reason to keep it and offered to give it to my jobless boyfriend. After having it for a week, he decided he didn't like it and ripped up both the title and registration, and I had to tape them back together to get the car back to the said coworker. I could go on. I was young and dumb. Story 25. Refused to move to a better opportunity or be a fully autonomous adult because her mom would guilt her at every opportunity to keep her from moving out of town. Story 26. She was looking for things to be upset about. She had given up long before I had and would just find reasons to pick at the relationship. I wasted so much energy on someone who just didn't want to be happy anymore. Story 27. She had no friends. We met between her first and second year of college. She had pictures of friends from high school who, she said, just decided they wanted to be friends with other people and not her. She went through 4 years of college and graduated with no friends. She could not even get into a sorority. All of these incidents were the fault of other people, according to her. She was incredibly toxic. Story 28. He would not introduce me to his friends for the longest time. I found out later he had been telling them all our problems to the point where they hated me before they even met me. Story 29. Claimed all of his exes were crazy and psycho. I'm sure he's probably telling whoever he's with now that I was too. So take note. If they claim all their exes had issues, take a good hard look at the common denominator and ask if it isn't possible that the individual you're potentially getting with isn't the reason why those exes have issues. Story 30. Putting his friends as a priority. His friends were his number one priority. His friends literally dictated our relationship, and I hated that I felt I was dating my ex and in a bisexual relationship with his friends, both female and male. I don't mind that my partner has friends, but there's a limit and a line of respect between your partner and friends. Every date I went on with my ex, his friends were there, or his friends gave my ex ideas. Story 31. He dated my ex, didn't tell me, and cheated on the guy with me. I was naive and stupid, and I thought he was a good guy at the time. He gave me this whole story about how he was forced into a relationship with my ex, which was highly toxic, etc., and I felt much pity for him. He chased after me for a year and kept pursuing me after this event, so I gave in. Spoiler alert, he cheated and choked me. Story 32. Not actually liking me the same way I liked her. I would put much effort into making her feel loved, like she asked me when we started. She said she had suffered in her previous relationship, that she wasn't loved, so I did my best to make her feel loved. In return, I received constant reminders about her ex and all the crazy things she let him do to her, including in terms of sex. It seemed like she was more intense and romantic in her previous relationship than with me. I should have ended that sooner than I did. Story 33. Made some Islamophobic comments before I got together with her, but I felt it's not something we cannot discuss down the line. We lasted a week before I realized how truly right-wing she actually was, and we broke up. Story 34. Compromising on your self-respect to protect a relationship and putting up with toxic behavior is a recipe for disaster. A relationship like that is already done for. Story 35. The abhorrent immaturity. My ex was 4 years younger than me. We were together for 8 years, from our 20s into our 30s. And he would get mad at the dumbest things, huff and puff, stomp his feet, and throw temper tantrums like a 4-year-old. It was so embarrassing. My friends would always laugh at him, and I would be mortified. Story 36. All his exes, even his mother, hated him and had nothing good to say about him. I was young, but I remember thinking it was odd. Most normal people have at least 1 or 2 amicable breakups where you can see the person in public and still be cordial. If every single one of your exes truly loathes you, it says a lot about you. I ignored the red flag and learned exactly why everyone hated his guts. Story 37. Putting me down, being controlling, and then never being responsible or accountable for their actions. It was always my fault that he was verbally or psychologically abusive. I made him treat me this way. If I eventually broke down and cried, which would take hours or sometimes days of consistent belittling and humiliation, my reaction was taken as an overreaction, which would then lead to more punishment and cold treatment, devaluing, and abandonment. He started to film me when I was trying to create a narrative that I was mentally unstable. When I broke it off, he later claimed I abused him. I'm not sure if anyone believed him. His friends were already uncertain about his character, and he hadn't been able to have more than 1 date with a woman in 8 years, no relationships, no second date. I need to work on my self-esteem and standards. I should have never let the relationship develop, as he showed these signs very early on. The earliest sign, when he would try to make me jealous of other women when we first started dating. He would claim other women were infatuated with him, yet also mentally unstable, or otherwise they friend-zoned him, to which he would remark they weren't good enough for him anyway. He deliberately tried to create turmoil and drama. Eventually, he started threatening to harm me and casually remarked how he thought about assaulting my pet. He has gone back to being perpetually single and hates and blames women. He is a self-confessed animal abuser and had been domestically violent in his only other relationship, which was over 8 years ago. He also had one testicle due to a testicular torsion. I used to feel total pity for him, but now I'm like, stop accruing such bad karma, or the other one is going to probably go too. Story 38. He and his best friend would shoplift compact discs when they were younger, and his sisters thought it was hilarious that they had all bullied a girl at summer camp. I passed it off in my mind as them just being spirited teenagers, but after I got away from the family, I realized those two things were early signs that they weren't the people I thought they were.